Well, hi, everybody. And I'm excited to see we've had some people who are joining us tonight for this is our very first Zoom Q&A. So it is kind of an experimental format that we're trying, that we thought it would be fun to give folks a chance to Zoom in as opposed to a literal call in and quiz us with their garden questions. And we won't tell you that there's a private competition going on in the background for who gets the most questions right, but we wouldn't do that. But anyway, but let me introduce you to who is here with me tonight. So I'm Alice Ely, and I am the gardens chair at Wakemantown Farm. I am a UConn Advanced Master Gardener and Master Composter. Yes, there is such a thing. And I am joined tonight by our absolutely stellar veggie whisperer, none other than Farmer Ryan Brunelle, who, when he isn't growing us the most spectacular tomatoes in town for the farm stand, he is also in a partnership called Garden Folk, where he does work similar miracles in other people's gardens. So we are also, as being Matt, and Ryan is a master gardener, as I am, and one of the things that we do as a service as master gardeners is we put in time at the UConn Plant Clinic, where we answer questions from gardeners all over the state. So this is a good ramp up for, we will be, each of us staffing Plant Clinic a few times later on the summer. So this is, we're going to get our chops all perfected tonight with questions from you guys, I hope. And also our host tonight is Haley Schulman. She is our brand new education coordinator at the farm, and we are so thrilled to have her, because if you liked our education programs for kids and adults in the past, wait till you see what she's got putting together. And now that the farm is able to be fully open again, we're so thrilled. And last, I would be remiss if I did not introduce you to Paul Rossi, who is also, he is an almost master gardener. He has been taking the UConn accreditation course this past winter, and he is no slouch in the garden either. So he's kind of our helpline. If we get stumped, we're going to see, we'll throw out a line to him. But anyway, Paul is going to be, what we'd like you all to do is, if you have a question, put in the chat your name, if it's not already on your ID thing, and whether it's flowers or veggies or trees or whatever your question concerns, put that in the chat, and Paul and Haley are going to dole out the questions to us. So I think we've got a good quorum here, and we're going to get started. So let us have it. What are your questions? Oh, one other thing I forgot to tell you, mute yourselves when you don't have a question. But if, for example, Paul says, Ellen, what's your question? Then you can unmute yourself and ask the question yourself. We are recording this. And I also should have mentioned that this is another presentation of Westport's Pollinator Pathway series here at Wakemantown Farm. So we are all about the pollinators, and that is why we're putting these programs on for you. Got any questions for us yet?
Ellen has a question if you want to unmute yourself.
All right, so I want to know when I can plant tomatoes. I know the weather's gotten warm enough, but is it warm enough? And my little seedlings are, thank you very much for the heating pad, that's helping, but for the plants. But I think I'm probably going to, get some other tomato plants to put in, because mine are kind of limping along. So can I plant them now? Is it warm enough, or should I wait till June?
to that point, since I know your seedlings are very, very small seedlings right now, I would let the seedlings grow a little bit longer.
Mhm.
They're going to be pretty small and they're going to go into shock pretty quickly. We have literally started planting tomatoes yesterday. Now, to some that's a little bit late, to some that's right on time, and to some that's super early. Many people go by Mother's Day as the benchmark date. That's kind of, I don't want to say that's gone out the window, but our seasons have changed here. They just have. And many people now wait. Memorial Day has kind of become the new norm for a lot of people.
Okay.
If you go by the old timers, they go by the first full moon in May, which this year is, I think, the 26th or maybe 23rd, 26th. And that's when they plant. So we kind of hedge our bet, and we have enough tomato plants that we can start it a little bit earlier. And if some don't make it, we could just replace them. And that's always a great way to go about it too. Just have some extra seedlings on hand so that if the early ones that you put in don't make it, you've got some backups. But right now is a good time. I mean, the long-term forecast right now looks super favorable to put them in. I probably wouldn't wait. But if you don't wait and they die, don't worry. We got your back that one.
Thank you.
Now,
And that's
Arlene-
only for tomatoes, though. Just keep in mind that's really only for tomatoes.
While we're on the topic of tomatoes, Arlene has a question about those as well. Arlene, can you hear me?
Maybe she wants to type their question in because it might be if her
We can
audio
actually
isn't
hear
working.
you if you want to say it.
Yeah, I was just, I've gotten kind of hooked on these heirloom tomatoes to the point that I'm going all over town looking for them. And I suddenly yesterday said to I bought a really funky looking one yesterday. And I said to myself, well, why am I buying these? What's so special about? And of course, they didn't know anything in the grocery store. I said something in the grocery store and they said, they cost a lot of money, was the reply. So I thought I should, as long as there's chatting on this program, I would ask while I'm sitting here looking at this. Really, it's long and it's got like ridges in it. It's really wild. I've had yellow ones, purple ones. So I'm obsessed with them. Why are they so special?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think probably the easiest answer to that is taste. The heirloom tomatoes just taste better. Whether it's a big slicer, or if it's a cherry tomato, or if it's one of these Amish paste tomatoes, they just taste better. The varieties that are not heirloom tend to be a little bland. There's an upside to that because they've been bred to be disease resistant or insect resistant, some kind of resistance, but you've lost that taste. So that's why a lot of people migrate towards the heirloom tomatoes.
But do they have different seeds? I've just gotten so curious about heirlooms versus, I grow tomatoes every year, and I just really was very intrigued by what makes them. Do they grow differently? I mean,
no, not really. I mean, you either have determinate or you have indeterminate tomatoes. There's only two varieties. It's just heirloom tomatoes have just been around for generations, basically. That's what it is.
oh, okay.
And
Thank you.
They taste much, much better.
I'm going to devour one tonight with feta and basil. I go from store to store looking to see if they have heirlooms. I
Yeah.
bought so far yellow, purple, Now I'm on this one, is kind of red, so
If you like them, save the seeds.
Oh.
Try to grow them.
really, oh,
Yeah.
good
It-
idea. Oh,
I've been saving seeds for 15 years. Every year I save. They change over time sometimes. They cross pollinate.
when
They
you,
do all kinds of funky things. But
I don't
again,
want
I
to
guess
keep
after a
you back.
while,
Let me, when I save the seeds, okay, do I plant them when they're soft, or do I dry them out? What do I do when I save the seeds?
You're going to dry them out, and then you're going to
Okay.
basically you're just going to save them for next year. You want to wash them off. They have a little coating on the outside that you
Okay.
kind of break down a little bit, and then you just put them on some wax paper and then put them in like an envelope.
Oh, great. Thank you
Yep.
so much. Okay,
Sure.
I'll be
And
growing
put
my
them in
own
your
soon.
refrigerator. Make sure you refrigerate them.
Thank you.
Arlene, we have a video where Ryan talks more extensively about how to save seeds. So check out, it's on our Wakemantown Farm website. So you can check it out and get the scoop.
Thank you. Wow.
Great question. That was actually new information for me too, so I appreciate you asking. Now, Andrea has a question regarding a pollinator pathway garden. So I think, Alice, this one's probably coming to you.
Okay.
Andrea, you're welcome to unmute yourself, or I can also try to do it. Oh, no.
I unmuted, and maybe I will. I ran in from work looking like who knows what. So maybe I will also, oh no. I might try and make video work.
You're amongst farmers. You're welcome to look
There you
however
go.
you please.
Okay. I'm a member of Saugatuck Church, and we would love in our beautiful central location to have a pollinator pathway garden. We have some fallow areas. And I was especially interested, this might even be a Wakeman host question, how you all collected a lot of cardboard as step one in your pollinator pathway. I wondered if that was a way to really deal with all the weeds. So where do we start? I think the planting the new is the easy part. Prepping the soil and getting rid of a lot of bad stuff is the challenge.
Andrea, you are so smart to realize that, because a lot of folks who are dying to have a pollinator garden just go to the nursery and go wild and get the plants, and they haven't prepared the site. And I always say, plant in haste, repent at leisure, because you will be weeding for centuries. So it really is true. Just as a first step, what you do is prepare your site by, it's a good idea to get out all the weeds you can, then you put down the cardboard, then you put down a thick layer of wood chips, and I mean a thick layer, and arborist wood chips that you can get free, they're giving them away most of the time. And then you have to be patient and let that site sit to let the ground really prepare itself, and then the following spring is when you can start planting. There is Prairie Moon, which is an online seed company, actually has some very good directions about how to prepare for a meadow type garden, and there's a lot of good information there. So that's a good place to start. But there's also great resources on pollinator-pathway.org, which is our pollinator pathway, regional pollinator pathway site, and there's fantastic information there. Reach out to me. Again, I've helped many of the organizations around town start their pollinator gardens. So you can put your email in the chat, and I'll follow up with you later. How's that?
Fabulous. So if the patience, it is for sure a year. There's not a lay it down now, and maybe we could, because we're also trying to involve our youth group. And of course, oh, you've had this great idea. Well, half of you will be gone by the time we actually get to the fun part. Is there anything we could do in the fall in a planting vein, or is it really a full year?
They might be able, they could sow some seeds in the fall in the prepared ground. A lot of the native plants actually like to be sown by seed in the fall, and then they come up in the spring. We're actually involving our Staples High School senior interns in our new pollinator garden that we are preparing this year. So there are some ways that you can involve youth in the upfront preparation that I think that they would enjoy. I can give you some ideas about that offline, because it's a little bit more of a process than I could do justice to in this call, Andrea, but
Okay.
you can definitely more things. And you can even come by the farm on Tuesday mornings is when I'm there and can show you around what we're doing for ours.
Okay, fabulous. It may not be me, it might be that woman in charge of our youth program, but thank you. So Tuesday mornings
great.
through when? For another
Through the
month?
through the growing season. Tuesday
so
mornings.
into the
Yeah,
summer.
that's
It
my time
doesn't
at the
stop
farm.
when school gets out.
Tuesday mornings is the time right now, because we have Staples interns at the farm in the mornings
Okay,
on Tuesdays.
great.
So
Thank you.
tomorrow
so
morning is their very first day. I'm working with them, so it'll be a little chaotic, but anytime after that, Andrea,
Okay,
any Tuesday morning after that.
I just put my email in the chat. Thank you.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you. All right.
Thanks, Andrea. The next question, it says comes from Biff, but I don't know if it's Biff asking the question, but you're welcome to, let's see, unmute. Okay, you're good to go.
I think that question, that's coming from Gail. Gail, you had the question about fertilizer?
I do, Ryan. So my question is best organic fertilizer for shrubs, flowers, and veggies. When I was at the farm not too long ago, fish emulsion was being used, and I was curious about when to use that, how to use it, how to mix it, what to use. That's my question. Questions.
Oh, always read your label.
Okay, do you have any fish emulsion? Is that the best to use, or do you just use that on vegetables?
I use a few different fertilizers. So I mix my own granular fertilizer that I use when I'm just planting plants. I like to have that deep down in the soil so that kind of, it's a slow release. And then I'll use a liquid fertilizer pretty much for the rest of the season.
Okay.
The advantage, I guess, for the fish emulsions, fish emulsion contains a lot of nitrogen, which is great early on for many of your plants, pretty much for all of your plants or grass. And it's kind of like it's a non-burn nitrogen. There's fertilizers out there that if you use too much of it, you're going to burn your plants. Fish emulsion, you don't get it with that. You can overdo it and you're okay. I would recommend using a fish and seaweed emulsion. That's kind of a better blend of your nitrogen, your phosphorus, your potassium. The fish tends to have heavy nitrogen. If you're growing something like corn, you don't need the phosphorus. You could do the nitrogen all day long, because again, that's just a giant piece of grass, and they really don't need the phosphorus. I mean, they need some of it, but you're fine with just a fish emulsion. But anything like your tomatoes or your peppers, eggplant, anything like that, you should get more of a balanced fertilizer, like a fish and a seaweed blend.
Okay, thank you. And now is a good time to plant bush beans, correct?
Yep, right now.
Okay.
Yep. Before you do that, try to soak your beans for a day. And if you could try to find an inoculant, it's like it's a black powder that basically What does the inoculant do? I mean, it's a bacteria that it helps with root growth. It helps with, I don't know. Alice, can you chime in on inoculants?
Well, it helps the plant do a better job of being fruitful, if you will, and it's almost like the bacilla in yogurt. I mean, it has.
Yes, that's a great example. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have 40 some odd seedlings in grow pots that I'm ready to put in the bed.
Oh, you already planted them. All right. Yeah.
So they're already planted, and I just want to be sure that I think that they're big enough now to go into the bed. So yes, that's my question. So
yeah, and
next, tomatoes next. Okay.
We're talking beans still.
Still beans, a lot of
Yeah.
beans.
So beans, sometimes they don't transplant well. They're not fantastic transplanting plants. Beans usually do very well just direct sown. You'll see if you plant a bean plant and then you just plant a seed, you're gonna find after a month they're probably the same size.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Ryan, actually, so you answered her question that yes, now is a good time to plant bush beans, but I'm curious, why is now a good time to plant bush beans? Did I stump the farmer? No, I'm just kidding.
It's just time, I guess. I don't know the science behind why right now is really good, but you basically you plant beans after the last frost date. Our last frost date around here, I think was April 30th, which again, that's based on a lot of old data too. There's a lot, actually, it's funny because I think there was an article that just came out that showed that they just basically got rid of 10 years of data, and they've moved to a new 10-year period, and it's all kind of changed because, as it turns out, climate change stuff. So, but just anytime after your last frost date is a good time to plant beans.
Awesome. Thank you.
Ryan, I have another question. So we need to plant a yellow and green squash. So you're saying perhaps direct sow is better than trying to grow in the grow pots and replant?
Yeah. I mean, if you have the plants already growing, certainly put them in.
I don't. I have the beans, but I don't have the squash.
I just direct sow it at this point. I mean, we'll be doing that at the farm this week, and they'll do better. Last year we waited. There's a theory that if you wait until after June, it kind of beats the life cycle of some of these pests, especially like the squash vine borer, and I can't say it worked smashingly last year, and we were a little behind, I would say, and still got the squash vine borer, and so we're planting early this year.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Grady, you're up next, and I love your question because you sound like me. You're welcome to unmute yourself and ask the question.
Thanks, and thanks for putting the class together. I really appreciate it. So yeah, first time joiner, heard about you guys because my wife follows Wakeman for their kids programs. I think our 1-year-old is in the Little Farmers program for a week or two before COVID got in the way. So we were happy to hear about this. So we're new homeowners and looking to start gardening. I've purchased and will be delivered a raised garden bed, about 17 inches high, just something small to get myself started, no experience, and wondering what's the easiest, most, the best pathway to success for someone starting out. What plant should I consider? Will I have any options this year if I get started in the next 2 weeks? Where should I begin? Yeah.
So you're talking vegetables as opposed to a flower garden?
Yeah, I prefer vegetables. Yeah.
Yeah.
Aha, it's you, Ryan.
Sorry.
Well, I guess the first answer to that is always plant flowers in your vegetable garden. That's
okay.
Always. You want to get some marigolds in there, you get some zinnias in there, some sunflowers in there. You want to attract, your vegetables are only going to attract so much, but it's the flowers that really attract the pollinators. So as much as you can do to bring in those pollinators to your garden. Where to start? So you're getting your garden. Are you also getting soil delivered?
Yes, I will be. I'm wondering about the best mix. I mean, you get a lot of advice on YouTube about, mixing in vermiculite, and there's different advice about ratios and things. I don't know where to go for that. So if you have any recommendations.
We get our soil from Gilberti's in Easton. Their soil is fantastic. It's certified organic. It's a composted topsoil. They basically take their spent seedlings and the soil that they use for that, mix it all in with some topsoil, and it's super fluffy and just beautiful. Highly recommend it. And then for vegetables, we're just starting planting. And it's not like you missed out on some early spring stuff like lettuces and kales and spinach, but we're just getting into the heart of all the tomatoes and peppers and zucchinis and cucumbers and squash. I mean, there's just plant what you like. Don't plant what someone told you, oh, this does real well. Plant what you like. And it's either going to work or it's not going to work. And if it's not going to work, try to figure out why it didn't work. Sometimes it just doesn't. I mean, there's certain plants that I can't grow in my garden. It just doesn't happen. There's certain vegetables that just don't really do well in our area. I would recommend skipping broccoli and cauliflower, broccoli rabe. Those vegetables take up a lot of real estate with very little return. Okay. And they attract every pest known. They're not worth it. Go buy a giant head, and you're literally going to get something like the size of your fist if you're lucky. It's just not worth it. In the fall, plant a lot of garlic. Absolutely.
Okay.
I really just recommend that you plant what you like and go from there.
Okay. Good advice. Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
The raised bed is 17 inches high.
Yep.
I do see rabbits around the area, and I'm wondering how effective that will be as a deterrent, or if I need something additional that's a little higher.
Yes, you will. Yeah, they will get into your garden.
Okay.
You should put. I mean, there's cheap fencing you could get at Home Depot. I mean, there's very simple options to keep out rabbits. Is your yard fenced in at all?
It's not entirely fenced. It's about half fenced, so there are entry points for them to get in.
Right. Your bigger issue is the deer.
Yeah, I think deer are less of a risk. We've seen them through the front, but I don't think they'll make it to the back where I am.
Yeah, they'll find it. It does attract animals when you start planting, and I recommend planting some trap crops elsewhere. 50 feet, 100 feet from your garden, plant a tomato plant. They'll more often than that, they're going to go for that than come close to the house to try to steal from your garden. Put up pinwheels, put up those little owls with the head spinning. There's a lot of different methods that you could do to deter, but if you don't have a fence, they're more often than not going to get in.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
Great question. Great conversation. I love that one. Ellen, you have a question about squash?
Yes. So last summer, I discovered delicata squash. Absolutely love it. So I just directly sowed a couple seeds in the garden. Any tips on growing? How much space do they need? I gave them a lot of space. Are they vines that kind of go along the ground, or do I prop them up?
Prop them up. Absolutely. The best thing you could do for any of those kind of vining plants is to grow vertically. Okay. Any of your squashes, any of your cucumbers, any of that stuff, beans, get some kind of trellising system that they could grow up on. You want to get those plants off the ground, especially when you get kind of later in the season, when we're getting cool, moist nights. And if they're just lying on the ground, you're going to get powdery mildew. You're going to get powdery mildew anyhow at some point in time. It's just a matter of how long you can fight that off. And by growing vertically, that's your best option to fighting that off.
And what do I do if I get it? Plant something else?
You do. I mean, that's kind of, a lot of people succession plant those kind of plants just for that scenario. I mean, we had last year at Wakeman, we had 4 succession plantings of our zucchinis. And the theory is once, we kind of focus on, a dozen vegetables. And once that's kind of done, that plant is done, we'll rip it out. We've already got the next one in line ready to go.
Okay.
The one thing with your delicata, with your squashes, and really any of your other squashes is the squash vine borer. That is, they're nasty. And again, chances are you're going to get it because everybody typically gets it.
Somebody was telling me about that with squash and also zucchini, that it goes into the stem and you don't really know it. And then all of a sudden one day, the plant's gone.
Well, you know it. You do. I mean,
can you see it?
You'll see the damage done, and you can save it. You can. I mean, we went in with scalpels and we would literally slice down the plant and rip it open, and we'd be pulling out these squash vine borers. It's gross. They're disgusting.
How big do they get? It sounds gross.
They're fat. I mean, they're like
really
long, fat white grubs.
Okay.
And you'll see. I mean, you can follow the damage up the plant. I mean, we gutted some of our plants last year, but we saved them because once you do that, if you can then somehow mound it up, if you catch it early enough, and you can mound up the soil around it, it will survive.
So it starts at the base. It starts at the base and goes up. Okay.
And to that point, one trick I'm going to try this year that I was just reading about is wrapping the base in tinfoil. I've never done before.
Doesn't cook it? It doesn't like overheat. Okay.
What's that?
And Ryan, didn't you figure out what the eggs looked like and spot those some of the time on the
Yep.
stems?
Yep. Okay. You can see on many of your plants, you'll see eggs. I mean, and just want to get rid of them. You have to look at your plants. You have to inspect the underside of the leaves. You've got to notice the changes. It's
okay. And you just pluck them off. If you find them, just pluck them off and
just squeeze them. Just pop them.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
There aren't any more questions in the chat, so I certainly encourage anyone who has any other questions to ask them there. But I do have a question for our master composter, which I didn't know existed. So that was another fun fact that I learned in this hour. So we have we do barrel composting at my house, and we produce a ton of what I think are greens. It would be the trimmings from strawberries, bad apples, and it's a lot more than what I think last year we were putting in for the browns. What we did put in for the browns last year kind of stayed as they were. Like the newspaper that we were putting in, I wouldn't really say broke down much. Do you have a suggestion on realistic browns I can put into those barrels?
Yes. And first of all, I will say that the problem with some of the barrel composters is they aren't that big, and the best way to get compost really cooking is you need a certain amount of critical mass. So if you don't have the cubic feet of area, the microbes don't have the critical mass to really get cooking and do their job. So if it's not quite making compost, it's maybe not all your fault. if in that circumstance, to get better compost out of those barrel composters, you have to be a little stricter about ratios. The microbes really care that they get their recipe the way they like it. And that is 1 part greens to 3 parts browns. And most of those little kitchen tumblers, you're just putting scraps in, and those are heavy on greens, not browns. And they may not have been getting tumbled enough. Even, and you said your browns didn't really break down, but one of the best things to throw in is chopped leaves. So if you have leftover leaves, and I encourage everybody to have a leaf pile somewhere on their property because it's so useful for mulch and all kinds of stuff. And I keep a bucket of leaves by my barrel composter. And when I throw in the greens, which tend to be the mucky, fresh stuff that comes from the kitchen, is high in nitrogen. So that makes it a green, as we call it. And it's kind of sometimes a little slimy. And you want to counteract that with the browns, which tend to be drier, and leaves make a perfect thing. And you can throw those in at any time. And also, the thing that in a little composter like that, you'll get much better results if you cut things up more before you put them in. The little microbes like edges, and when you have more pieces and more edges, it's easier for them to get working, breaking things down, because it's not worms doing the job in there, it's bacteria. So you want to make it easier for it to break down, and do tumble it, and try to add in regularly the browns to your greens. And if it's too wet, you probably haven't put enough browns in. If it looks too gloppy.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. That was great.
Hey, and also to that point, so Alice, we made new compost on Saturday at the farm. We've got a pretty extensive compost bin system, and we filled up our newest bin. Today was 145 degrees in that bin.
That's how you know, because you got the recipe. You put a thick layer of brown, a thin layer of green, thick layer of brown, and repeat. Yep. And that is what gets the microbes cooking. It is amazing how fast that temperature shoots up, isn't it?
Yep.
So great. Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah.
Grady, you're welcome to follow up with your question.
I think you answered it. I've got lots of leaves. We have a beech tree in our backyard that sheds leaves at a prodigious pace. So I've kept some of those, and it sounds like that would probably fulfill a lot of my need for the browns and a compost pile. Are there any
I think you want to stay away from oak. I think you just don't want a lot of oak leaves in your compost.
Okay.
If you could stick, is that true, Alice? Or am I just pulling that
If
out
they're
thin air?
chopped up, they're okay. It's true. Oak leaves have a lot of tannin, and they're kind of leathery, so it's hard to break down. But if you ran over them with a lawnmower, or if you had one of those leaf choppers, then it's fine. It'll break down. There's enough edges created, then it'll break down. Other things, by the way, that people are surprised to find out are browns are dryer lint, pet hair. Everybody has some of that.
Stuff.
Paper towels if they're not greasy or soapy. Just
Excited to hear that pet hair applies, because I got that aplenty. Liz, do you want to unmute yourself to ask your question?
Oh yeah, I just was asking, how do you know how much compost to add to your garden?
Oh, that's a really good question.
And
Ryan,
is there like a measurement? Like, do you like figure out, and if you don't have a compost pile and you're gonna go to the farm and buy it, how do you know? How do you know the amount?
If you think of your compost that you're adding is how much is organic matter you're adding to your soil, and in nature, organic matter is 10 to 20% of the soil. So you wouldn't want to add more than a couple inches of compost, and an inch is plenty as a top layer, just on the top of your soil. You don't even have to work it in. It'll work itself in.
It's also important when you put it in too. And we highly recommend getting a soil test, because there are times when, compost tends to be high in phosphorus. If your garden already is overloaded with phosphorus, you don't need to add any more, because it does take several months for that phosphorus to work its way out. So get a soil test. You don't want to put compost in July. It tends to be, compost tends to be what they call hot. It just means it hasn't really broken down enough that it's not going to burn the plants. So the best time really to put compost is either in the fall or early in the spring, so that gives it, time for that to kind of break down a little bit more and acclimate to the soil.
If it's well-aged compost, it's been sitting for quite a while, it's not as likely to burn as brand new stuff that you just
Yeah.
I think.
But it's always a risk, I think. Like if you're just buying a bag of aged compost from Home Depot, you have no idea how old it is. So it's just always err on the side of give it some time.
I saw Andrea asked coffee. I think she was wondering if it's a brown or a green. Surprisingly, coffee is a green. You wouldn't believe it's counterintuitive, but it's very high in nitrogen. So it's actually a good thing to put in your when you're making your compost. Coffee grounds right with the filters, put it right in.
Would a filter be a brown though? Or the filter has the nitrogen?
The filter's the brown, the coffee's the green. So maybe it's 2 in 1.
Any other questions? Ellen?
Told you I had a bunch. So I just bought a bag of mushroom compost. I haven't used it, but I was just intrigued by it. So is it too late to put that on, work that into the soil? Is it not worth using?
What do you think, Ryan?
I don't know. I'm not the master composter yet. I'm only taking the course.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. So, but I know you like mushroom compost, and I know you've been using it. The ideal thing would be it to maybe side dress the plant with. That's what they tell you to do sometimes.
Yeah, I wouldn't use it right now. I'd hold off on using it.
Okay.
And again, I would get a soil test. I mean, I know you got a new plot.
Mm-hmm.
You really don't know what's going on with that soil. You don't know what anyone else has been putting into that plot.
Yeah, I put about 12 bags of soil into it. It was labeled organic for raised beds. So I did put a lot in there. But yeah, testing it is probably a really good idea.
Yeah, I would test it out. Especially any community plot, it would be.
You don't know what's in there. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I forgot you were in the community plot.
Right, and I haven't found a worm yet, so that makes me think that it needs a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Ellen, when you send in your soil test, there's something that they will tell you if you ask for it. You have to check the extra box, and that is the organic matter test.
Okay.
So the standard soil test, they don't check the organic matter. It's really good to know what percentage organic matter, because that's a big clue about the health of your soil.
Okay. And I send that into what, UConn or?
The UConn Soil Lab.
Okay, great idea. Thank you.
Could you actually follow up on the steps one would take to do that soil test? So is there a website that we would visit? How do you connect with UConn Soil Lab?
In fact, there's a video that is on our Wakeman Town Farm site in which I tell people all the steps to doing a soil test. I may not have mentioned about checking the box for organic matter, so I threw that in now, but it is on the Wakeman website. And if you can't find it, shoot us an email.
You know what, we mentioned a couple different resources. I can send that out to everybody as a follow-up to this as well. So you have it right there.
Perfect. Thanks, Haley.
And Stan, you have a question?
Yes, I do. I want to know how often you recommend to water our vegetables and flowers, and what time of day and how much water.
Sure. So I recommend any vegetables really you would want about 1 inch a week. Certain flowers like roses need 2 inches a week, but 1 inch a week is a pretty good benchmark. So all of that is based on how much rain we're getting, really. Watering time, early morning is definitely the best. You never want to water late in the evening or late at night. That's not, you don't want your plants wet when they're going to bed. So try to do it as early in the morning as you can. And if you could do a little bit each day, if you could turn it on for like a half hour each day, drip irrigation is definitely the best. Try to keep your leaves dry and just stick to morning watering.
Thank you.
I would
Grady. I'm sorry.
add to Ryan's, everybody get a rain gauge. They're so inexpensive and it's really your best. I keep a rain gauge. I empty it every Sunday so I know how much rain I got that week, and that helps me know what my plants need. They're really inexpensive, and it's funny because it's hard to know exactly how much rain your neighborhood got unless you have your own gauge. So be sure to do that.
Yeah.
Grady. Yep.
Thanks. So a couple of questions. I've heard people say that you should put a thin layer of mulching on top of your plants, like straw or something. Is that something that's smart to do? Does it help? Is straw the best material?
I feel it is. I use chopped straw on all the gardens, on my own gardens, on all the gardens I maintain. Chopped straw is fantastic. It acts as your weed barrier, moisture control. It breaks down beautifully into the soil. Some people don't like the look of it. That's probably the only downside I feel to it, but it's wonderful. It's great material. In the fall, if you want to put down something like, if you know what sweet peat is a composted bark, and that's just that's something that I would do in the fall. It does have compost in it, so that kind of feeds your soil throughout the winter. I wouldn't do that in the spring. I like to use chopped straw in the spring and something like a sweet peat or just chopped leaves in the fall. If you just put cardboard and then chop leaves in your garden in the fall, you're golden.
Oh, good to know. And second question, probably for Alice. So tulips and crocuses in this area, do those do reasonably well? Are there any challenges, advice in that area?
Well, Grady, I can tell that you haven't had much experience with deer yet, as you mentioned earlier. Tulips are only for those folks who have fences.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
A tulip is probably the #1 deer bait.
Oh yeah, it's like lollipops.
Plant. So crocuses, however, they ignore. And my beekeeper friends tell me that crocuses are one of the earliest sources of pollen, food source for our pollinators. So neither of them happen to be native, but in the case of, we give them a pass. I would say the other thing about tulips is they're not very long lived. So as beautiful as they are, they have a lot of drawbacks for those of us who don't have fully fenced yards. But have fun with crocuses, because crocuses, you can put crocuses all kinds of shady places in the middle of the lawn and everything, and they will bloom when nothing else. I've seen lawns that were filled with crocuses. It's quite a sight. And we are lucky here in Connecticut, there is an employee-owned wholesale bulb company called Color Blends that is in Bridgeport, but they will sell to the public, which is nice if you place a certain size order. It's not unreasonable or anything, and they have great selection. You can place your order in July while they have all their choices, and they'll ship it to you when it's getting to be time to plant. And that, I think, is you'll be doing the bees a favor as well as giving yourself some early color. So go for it.
If the crocuses aren't native, do you have a good replacement that is native that you would recommend?
Well, yes, there are one of the early bulb choices. There's Sanguinaria is an early choice bloodroot. it is poisonous, so they don't eat it. It's white, so it doesn't put on the show of crocuses. So I would say even my friends at Earth Place, who are even more hardcore than I am about trying to use natives as much as possible, give crocuses their blessing, because it is an early source of food for pollinators, and it's not crowding out native bulbs. But another native bulb that you might really like is trout lily, which is very beautiful, and Virginia bluebells. So you can get all of those things and have a big pretty show.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? You're welcome to ask. We have no more in the chat.
Well, we are so disappointed that you didn't stump Ryan.
Come on.
Well, actually, as a follow-up to one of the original questions that we were asked, are we planting any heirloom tomatoes at the farm? Could Arlene come to the farm stand sometime this summer and grab herself a delicious heirloom tomato?
Many. We planted about 120 tomato plants today. I'm sure we'll have one extra for you.
Andrea, you have a question. You're welcome to unmute yourself.
So the the little Star of Bethlehem type flowers, some are invasive, some are not. I have a few in at my work property, so I don't know how they got there and what their history is. And I've looked online and in catalogs, they all look the same to me. So how do I tell them apart, and who's a good guy and who's not?
Well, the unfortunate fact is if they just showed up, they're probably the invasive ones. Invasive ones have a way of doing that. That's how they got their name. In terms of an actual positive ID on that, you might try Go Botany because they get it's online and you can submit a picture. And iNaturalist.com is also very good, where they have actual scientists kind of screening the IDs, and they'll confirm your ID. So that's probably your best bet if you're not sure if they're a good guy or a bad guy. But I'd be willing to bet that they're not the good guy if they just showed up.
Okay, thanks.
Any last questions? We have 2 minutes left. Would love to end on a good one.
Well, I would like to mention that on Saturday mornings, we have an informal practice called Ask the Farmer, and Ryan is always there on Saturday mornings. And if you think of something or you got a puzzle, feel free to stop in and ask Ryan what he thinks. And we also welcome volunteers at the farm on Saturday mornings, so you can get a little hands-on practice gardening if you want to. We have a jolly band of volunteers there most of the time.
And those are also farm open hours Saturdays as well. So if you don't happen to have a question and that day you're not particularly dressed to volunteer with Ryan, you are always welcome at the farm at that time. We'd love to have everyone. Okay. I think we're good to wrap it up then, unless anyone has any final questions. Okay.
Stan asked a question. Did you see Stan's question?
Yep. One last question from Stan, if you want to unmute yourself, or I can ask it for you.
Yep. I just wanted to know what the purpose of mulch is, and is it something that is good for the soil, good for the plants, or is it a waste of time?
Definitely not a waste of time. I mean, mulch, what you're doing is you're covering your soil, and you always want to cover your soil with something. If you don't, it's just going to strip the nutrients away. Some mulches are better than others. I prefer cedar mulch. I think it's looks great, smells great. Cedar mulch deters many pests, and it breaks down beautifully into the soil. It adds to your soil. Wood chips can be used in other scenarios. You don't want to use wood chips in your vegetable garden. Wood chips, when they break down, they use up a lot of nitrogen, and when they're taking that nitrogen, it's stealing the nitrogen from your plants that need it. So you just don't want to use any wood chips right next to your vegetables. You could use that as like a walking path, again, because you want something on top of just bare soil, but you don't want that in your vegetable garden. I love cedar mulch. I think cedar is just wonderful.
Stan, I would agree 100% with what Ryan says about how important mulch is to protect the soil. It helps keep water in. It saves water. It protects the plants in the wintertime. If you leave your leaves, they act as a natural mulch, and it protects the plant from extremes of cold temperature change, which causes less stress on the plants, and you don't get frost heave, and a plant that's borderline hardy in your neck of the woods will make it through with the help of a nice coating of mulch. There are just so many uses. The only thing I don't like mulch for is when it's piled in a volcano around the trunk of a tree, which landscapers sometimes do. That's the only bad place for mulch.
Yep.
Because it should be a donut around the tree. Give the trunk room to breathe.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Alice and Ryan. I so enjoyed this time, and I hope everyone did as well. We will have a lot more community programming in the future, so please follow Wakeman Town Farm on social media or add yourself to our newsletter, which you can do so online. As I mentioned, I'll follow up with everyone with some of the resources we mentioned, and you're welcome to always get back in touch with me with any questions, and I can field them to the correct person, or you can also get in touch with Alice and Ryan. They're happy to be a resource to you as well. And please come to the farm on Saturdays.
Thank you, Haley.
Thank you. And Alice and Ryan.
Bye, everybody. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.